All right. So here we've got Eli. Let's take a look and just see what his visual posture looks like. Eli, just totally relax your arms and let's take a look at you from the front first. So what stands out to you right away, Kyle?
Just looking at his arms, it looks like there's just a general left, shifting to the left. Sorry, man, we're going to pick you apart.
Please do.
Kind of just shifting to the left a little bit, or maybe it's actually the right hip going more to the right. Probably a combination of the two, in my opinion. It looks like the right fingers go down a little bit further, but it could just be the lighting that I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say?
Yeah, I think you could see that his ab wall on the right is a little bit side bent. Yeah. And his one on the left is a little bit open. And it looks like your shoulders are relatively symmetrical, but it also looks like your left one wants to drop. It looks like your right upper trap is a little bit higher than your left. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But dude, you got some awesome delts.
Yeah, you do. I wish I had that.
Doesn't even matter.
All right, let's take a look at the side.
Can you step forward just a little? There we go, man.
Yeah, so right away, I think it's pretty clear the anterior pelvic tilt is there. And because of that, he's needing to have a bigger upper back arch in order to even himself out and keep an even center of mass going through the midline of his body. Also a little bit of forward shoulders as well, I would say.
Yeah, agreed.
Mm. All right, let's look from the back. So this is where, yeah, you can kind of see the differences in the angles and slopes of his shoulders and traps.
Yeah, that right side is definitely popping around, rolling forward a lot more. And then, I don't know, man, it might be that lighting, but I still, like you were saying, that kind of ab wall and that right side.
Yeah.
Over there, it's pretty pronounced.
I would say so. Yeah, definitely more significantly than his left. You could see a bigger angle on his right lat than his left lat.
Definitely. And, I guess typically for those that are going to be watching the recording, with anterior pelvic tilts, sway backs, all this stuff, there is some sort of transverse plane action or a twist that may kind of occur, which can just be added on to these postures or within the posture and the presentations that we're seeing at the joints and major structures.
Mm-hmm. So he might have a little bit of, well, most humans have a degree of asymmetry. So he probably started an orientation like this, where his pelvis is going right. And then that would also sort of turn his lower spine to the right, which would also compress his right ab wall together. And usually most people have a lower right shoulder than left, and that pushes him forward on the right with his shoulder. So you can kind of see how that was taking place because of the development of his right ab wall. And then that forward pelvic orientation is compressing his low back. And then he needs to have a bigger sway up here so that you can keep an even center of mass. So that's pretty much what we're seeing so far. And I might just be looking at this through the lighting, but it looks like his neck is side bent to the right just a little bit.
Yeah, especially as we're relaxing there, Eli. Kind of seeing more and more. Now you're going to tense up, but but I think too, this is a perfect segue into just talking about how, a visual representation of our posture is great in terms of hey, we're seeing how the system relates to gravity and the behavior, but Connor and we're biased and we want to see what we want to see. Yeah, you can turn around, man. but we're going to say what we see. Yes, it is important and it can be super helpful, but overall, we need to dive into more objective testing to kind of see the shape or what is actually happening at each joint. And that can confirm or deny kind of that if that is truly an anterior pelvic tilt or what else might be going on.
Right. Yeah. And also it's important to hit on that note, the visual stuff is great, but ultimately what we're concerned about is restoring your movement, because there's a lot of research that suggests posture isn't correlated with pain. And I think that should be considered heavily if we're trying to, you know, get you out of a degree of discomfort, or if we're trying to improve your movement. Because if your movement improves, then that's ultimately what's going to help you feel better and live a better life. If you had a huge, significant visual postural abnormality, then we would probably be concerned about that. But you don't really have that. You just appear to be someone in a little bit of the anterior pelvic tilt. And we talked before the video, you don't have a ton of issues going on within your body. And that could be one case where you could have someone who looks great, but they have a ton of issues. So ultimately, that's why we need to assess movement and then clear that up. So with that being said, you want to hop in the assessment?
Works for me.
All right. So first things first, we're going to take you just through a bodyweight squat. So I'll just demo this. Stand with your toes straight ahead, feet hip width apart. And then I just want you to keep your feet flat on the ground, drop down into a nice squat, and then hold that bottom position for as long as you're just comfortable with while we check you out.
That work?
That should work. So that's a pretty good squat.
Easy, easy.
Yes. Nice. Yes. Could you hang out there for a little while? Yeah. You look comfortable down there. So what we're seeing there is his ability to basically open up his pelvis and drop down into a nice squat. So someone like me, if you guys watched me push my hips back in the squat, that's because I also have an anterior pelvic tilt, but my pelvis is more forward and my sacrum bone comes forward like that, which prevents me from opening back up and dropping down into a nice squat. But Eli has no problem with that. So that's a good sign. That means that you can access those mechanics. So that's really great. You can go ahead and stand up. All right. And now
mind if we see that from the back?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you
out.
Okay. I was just curious if there were going to be any shifts or some of that transverse plane stuff.
No, that looks good. You look pretty symmetrical there. And then go ahead and stand up. Now we're going to keep your stance the same, but we're going to have you bend over and touch your toes. So a side view would probably be good for this one to start, and maybe angle the camera up just a hair. So a lot of people think of this as a hamstring flexibility test, and while that is partially true, it is also measuring the ability for your pelvis to go through those same joint actions. So as he bends over and touches his toes, he actually needs to be able to bring that sacrum bone forward, and he has no problem with that whatsoever. So he could palm the floor and just hang out there. Another thing I'm going to look at is what his upper back and lower back is doing. So you can tell that he has a little bit of a tent, a little bit of a rib hump right in the middle of his upper back there. And what that is often indicative of is a six pack that is really tight and basically pulling him down. So I think he can touch the floor and hang out there all day because he is able to compress his rib cage. He's able to compress his upper body, and he's also able to stretch his hamstrings and place them in a very lengthened position and then just palm that floor. So I think that what's going on here, yep, you can see him just straighten out his knees and it's still no problem. So I think his hamstrings are probably in a chronically lengthened position, because if your pelvis is forward like this and the hamstrings attach on this bone right here, they're going to be stretched and they're going to be placed on stretch. And then he's also compressing the front side of his rib cage in order to go down and just basically bend over and fold over to palm that floor. You have any other notes, Kyle?
Oh man, looks like you're stretching your hamstrings big time.
All right, so now let's do some hip flexion. Let's see things in more of a unilateral or single leg sense. So what I want to have you do is, you don't want to take these pads with me, lay down on the floor and put your feet up against the wall if possible. If not, it's not the end of the world. And then you want to keep your low back nice and flat. I like to keep my hands on my low ribs to make sure I'm not arching my back excessively. And then keep one heel driven into the wall. Keep this hamstring nice and flat. And then actively pull one leg back into flexion without this leg coming off of the floor or deviating your leg outward. After you feel a restriction, go ahead and stop right there.
This work?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Cool. I'll start with the right leg.
Sure. So what I'm looking for is when he wants to lift up that other hamstring, or when he says he gets a pinch in that hip, or he just feels restricted. So where do you feel that restriction?
Hip's not pinched, but it feels like hip flexor's as short as it could possibly get. Like I'm flexing the crap out of it.
For sure. And it looks like you have pretty good motion here. Now, we're looking for about 120 degrees on this. And it looks like he might be just short of that. But it's really not, that's not a red flag to me at all. But something we can also consider with this assessment is that if you're starting in an anterior pelvic tilt orientation, then you could be already starting in a degree of hip flexion. So you could, what was that?
Already starting in relative hip flexion.
Exactly. So it could be easy for you to pull that leg back because you're already starting in a degree of hip flexion. But that's why we need to cue you to keep your low back flat, because that can help you to not compensate through that. So did you feel like your low back was pretty flat on the floor when you did that?
I can maybe send a little more attention there.
Yeah, let's give it a shot.
If I get the low back flat, I can't get the knees down.
And that's a perfect indication of what could be potentially going on here.
So knees are back
you don't have
flat,
to force it.
There's like an inch, half inch.
Yep. And there's the anterior pelvic tilt speaking right there.
So I feel like I get a little deeper with the low back flat, but of course I lose that knee.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's good. Let's see your other side. Easy for you. Now let's see what happens when you just keep that leg nice and flat for comparison's sake.
Shot forward a little.
Yeah. You can see your low back arched up.
Do you feel like the left side was easier than the right side?
Left side definitely went up smoother for sure. And I don't have it doesn't feel like it's in range like flexion. Like I don't feel like I'm squeezing the crap out of it near as bad.
So with that left side, if we go back to what we said about a potential underlying asymmetry, if the pelvis is a little bit oriented to the right, then he's able to, let's just say he's laying on the floor here and he's tilted like this, then that's going to be easier for him to access that mechanic right there. So that is an indication, but we need to use other assessments to cross-reference and find the best, most likely outcome. So now let's measure your straight leg raise. So I want you to get in the same exact position and just do the same exact thing, but keep your leg perfectly straight. And as soon as you feel like your knee needs to bend or you feel like you need to rotate your pelvis at all, test is over. And this is another one that people think is a hamstring length test, but it's also measuring the ability for your pelvis to go into a degree of internal rotation as well. So we'll see what happens with this. So that's pretty easy for him, but you can see that he has a slight degree of bend in his knee. Is that as straight as you can keep that knee?
Yep. My quads are wanting to cramp a little bit right now, so.
Yeah. Let's have you go back down and then keep that knee 100% locked out. And then once you feel like it needs to bend at any degree, let us know.
Okay. Try harder.
Try harder.
Right about there.
And you can see his other legs start to come up. So really, I think you're probably done a little bit earlier than that. Probably around 80 degrees-ish is what I would say. Let's see your other side.
Other side.
He's got more, way more.
What I always look out for is when that leg comes off the ground. So let us know when you feel like that right leg is going to come off of the ground, and then stop there.
Good God.
The quads. Yep.
Right about there. It's wanting to shoot up.
Mm-hmm. So again, the starting orientation can affect this. So I think because you're starting an anterior pelvic tilt, it's easier for you to get into that hip flexion. But what we also notice on this is that what we're really looking for here is around 70 degrees. And that's an indication that you can get your leg to go into internal rotation and keep it in internal rotation. And then you can access all the pelvic mechanics necessary, which is generally the ability to go here into internal rotation. And then for the end range, that spine needs to tip back a little bit at the lumbar spine. So what I'm seeing with you is I think your hamstring is, again, just very long. So I don't think that necessarily you have a full degree of internal rotation. I think that you're bypassing it a little bit because your hamstring is so long. I think that's an indication, and it also lines up with what we saw in your toe touch. Do you have any other notes on that, Kyle?
No, I completely agree. That's exactly what I was going to say. I'd like to see, I think, just a internal and external rotation at the hip. And we can do that the same way, just in supine. So, but I want the top of your head facing the camera. So you'll be down. You don't have to put your feet against the wall. Just be down, come up to about 90, and then go internal and external. And then we'll check this side too.
Okay.
Let's give that a shot.
With the elevation from the heel and the fireplace, it's going to take away or add a little bit to my, or I guess make the knee extension easier. Is that going to be a problem at all?
Can you just put your heel against
the base of the...
Yeah, the base of it.
Still see? Cool.
Perfect.
Starting with right. Just at 90?
Yeah, just at 90. Okay, pretty good. So we're looking for about 45 there. And then he actually has less with his external rotation. So probably, what would you say, like 35, Connor?
Yeah, ish.
Yeah. Whereas that looks good.
Mm-hmm.
Let's check the left side. It's got a ton.
Yeah.
And then still limited, probably like 35 again on the ER.
So why is it that he has a lot of internal rotation, but not a lot of external?
Right. So I think this is where we're seeing kind of what we were talking about earlier in terms of that like orientation. So you're there. And then what we're getting is you're still able to get a ton of internal rotation instead of like your external rotation is limited essentially. Can you do the pelvis model?
Yeah.
I need to get one of these. So what you'll see is like a rotation that'll happen for a lot of people, which will antivert. Basically takes your femurs and just like pops them back, right? And so you'll see a lot of people with an anterior pelvic tilt and they're able to clear a ton of external rotation. Or you'll see instead the pelvis will actually kind of be compressed in this like mid stance type of deal. And with that, the pelvis will still go forward, but you'll still maintain internal rotation measures, but you'll be lacking your external. That was super quick.
So it's like the headlights are facing forward.
Yes. There we go. So everything's kind of dumping forward.
So like the outer wall texturally rotate is closer in.
Right. You can compress in really well, but like going back out is like a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways. And it's just because that pelvis, like it's just going forward. And then you see that big low back. It's like from the top, like that middle or that low back portion here. It's like you're being shoved and it's going boom.
Yeah. It used to be worse before, like first 2 years in a CrossFit, I had like a really big sway in the low back.
Yeah.
It's cleaned up a little bit, especially after a couple back bumps later, but,
well, I think too, it kind of explains why we're seeing that like extreme length in the hamstring, because this is like getting hit, dumps you forward, which just lengthens that proximal hamstring big time. So
gotcha.
You can, boom, fold over, touch your toes, straight leg raise, knee to chest, super easy. But that low back is kind of where this might be like originating from, and that, you know, what we're seeing is a visual presentation of an anterior pelvic tilt.
Yes. So what would you say like he needs for exercises or drills to help get him in a better position?
I would say let's get the hamstrings turned on.
Yeah. I was thinking give you a position that will allow you to bring your pelvis back and will help you sense those upper hamstring muscles that are currently lengthened. So these upper hamstring muscles contract, get your pelvis to pull back and get you more upright. So a really basic way we can do that is just a bridge variation. So I like single leg variations. And I think because you're someone who lifts and you have a degree of strength already, you can use a single leg version because you probably have the strength to do so and also the coordination. But if you didn't, I'd probably start you with a double leg bridge. I'd probably start you in a position more like this, and then digging your heels in, and then coming up, reaching down low. But what we're going to have you do is we're going to have you lift one leg up, and I want you to hold that, sensing that upper hamstring, trying to pull the floor to you with that heel. And then if that's too much, you can just tap on and off the floor, reaching down by your sides. And then to breathe through that, I want you to exhale through your mouth, nice and long. Get all that air to go out. Yep, just like you're fogging a mirror with your breath. And then pause for a second, inhale through your nose on top of that, making sure that all that air isn't necessarily going into your belly. Try to keep those ribs down as you inhale through your nose. Cool. Do about 5 full breath cycles of that.
Will do. That work?
Yeah.
Cool. So tuck back. Reach low, palms up.
Yes.
Got the tuck off the floor.
Yes, sir. You should feel like you're in that posterior pelvic orientation. It's up to you if you want to just hang out there or tap. Good. So you can see that this is not easy for him. He's feeling that hamstring work, and that's good. So you can see him trying to stabilize a little bit here. So if you feel more comfortable just slowly tapping your heel, that's fine. But make sure that you're just under control and you're staying very relaxed. Because when we try to change the way our body moves, or we try to give our body a new input it's not used to, what often happens is we tense up and we get very stressed out. But that's a fight or flight response. And if we're in fight or flight, then our body's going to sense that position as more of a threat rather than something that can potentially help us. So we want to make sure that we're staying really chill to the degree that we can, and also just making sure that we're going nice and slow, which it looks like he's doing a good job of. How was that?
Woo!
Brutal. Yeah. Where were you feeling it?
The knee felt like it wanted to turn out and give me a lot of medial hamstring, but I tried to try and keep my hip in line with the knee, and it definitely got a little more lateral, and a little bit of glute actually.
Mm-hmm. Something else I noticed with that is that your six-pack tensed up quite a bit when you were doing it. And I think to a degree, a natural extent, that is going to happen, but I saw it really contract. And I think that is indicative of what we saw on your toe touch too. And that's
just this muscle compressing you and pulling you down so you can just fold over. So I think you just really like to use your six packs, and I think your obliques themselves are probably relatively less quote unquote functional within controlling your pelvic orientation. So because the obliques attach on the pelvis, they do actually help pull it back. So we do want them on to some degree, but we achieve that through the exhale, which will help you keep your ribs down. Let's try that on your other leg now and see the difference.
So softer exhale, more like I'm deflating and less like I'm pushing it out.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
The obliques will come on as a natural byproduct of the exhale.
All right.
So in that position, just really try to let go of that six pack. Try to keep the glutes off and just let that hamstring hold everything.
Mm-hmm. I like to give the cue of imagine your six pack is a jelly-filled donut and your six pack is the jelly, or your core is a jelly-filled donut and your six pack is the jelly.
And really with this too, I mean, I don't know what you do, Connor, but I just have people take a full inhale, full exhale, and just try to breathe as easily as possible. Especially if we're getting that six pack that likes to turn on a lot. Breath holding may not be our friend at this point.
Right.
And of course, we just have to make you struggle to make a change.
I think for the next position, getting him in a position that would help him shut off that six pack will be important.
I was thinking a sidelined.
Mm-hmm. Nice work. All right, Kyle, you want the next one?
Yeah. What do you think about like a sidelined, like single leg? I don't know. I mean, we could easily just go into a, how about you put, we don't have any corners. So your feet are going to go there at the wall, and we'll just do like a 90-90 variation. And then is that a foam roller or a yoga mat?
Yoga mat.
Yoga mat. We'll just take the yoga mat and you'll, here, I'll show you real quick. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. So I'll take the yoga mat, ball it all up, and this will go in between my knees and my ankles. And then just sideline, I'd actually come a little bit higher than 90. So if like this is a 90-90, come to maybe here. Okay. So I'm here, feet are against the wall. This is going to support. And then just nice and easy, kind of feel like that left oblique, make a tunnel underneath here. And then just breathing nice and easy. Full exhale, pause for 5 seconds, inhale nice and easy. And feeling this side, like that air pressure, kind of stretch this whole side of the body out. And then hitting, I would hit both sides. That's just a recommendation, just to kind of start like expanding. Yeah, you want, and that's like, I think a really good one to start with before you jump into these, because it's going to relax that six pack.
Yeah.
Get these alternating compression, expansion, oblique type stuff happening. And then once that six pack is shut off a little bit, go after the hamstrings big time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'll probably do this.
And also,
does that work for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
That'll work well. Just,
And I'm a little more open than the 90-90.
Yes, sir.
the influence of gravity is really big here too, just because we don't consider that a whole lot. But thinking about gravity, I think is a little bit underrated, because when gravity is pushing down on someone, the position they're in is going to influence where the pressure is going to go. So for example, if I have a water bottle, I've got this water cup right here. If I was laying on my back, then everything is going to go down into my back. All the pressure is going to go down to my back and help me expand that. Or if I'm going to maybe flip over and lay on my side, then the pressure is going to go and compress down on me laterally, which is going to compress me from side to side. So then I'm going to be able to expand my rib cage from front to back. So that's why this position is advantageous for what we're going for here.
Right. You can actually see, if you look at his abdominal wall, how the left side is actually hanging down. Like that's essentially what we're going for, to kind of expand that left side. One thing I would suggest, man, as you're going through this, Eli, is put left arm underneath your head just to support it, because we want the neck nice and relaxed. Pull your ribs back toward the glass just slightly, and then give me a slight tuck of your bottom. Again, we don't really want glutes and abs doing that. Let it be those hamstrings. So dig in those heels. And you should just feel kind of that upper hamstring do all the work. Back pockets to the back of the knees. Are you feeling that?
I got a little bit right there.
Okay. It's not going to be a ton.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit more like the back pocket tuck, though. You might feel that higher up on the hamstring. Gorda?
About the same. Still difficult to get there.
Okay. Find that like inner heel. And then one other thing too is you can kind of hear Eli as he likes to exhale immediately. So that's an indication of that kind of six pack doing this job, and you're just using this compressive strategy to like compress everything all at once. So go like super prolonged, like 20-second exhale, and it's a slow leak.
Yeah. Yeah, you immediately look more relaxed.
Yep.
Your whole body just kind of chilled a little bit there.
Yeah. Well, fine. I mean, I do this all the time. Like, I want to force it, and you want to like muscle through these.
Right.
Especially from a lifting background, because that's what we do. Grind through it.
Exactly. Yeah. These are not max strength or effort exercises. I like to cue people, like, it's just treat it like it's meditation almost, because that's what gives people the mindset of down regulating their nervous system, getting them to like actually chill out so their body can accept this new position, as opposed to fighting it because it's foreign.
How's that feeling, Eli? Is that different?
Yeah, pretty relaxing for sure.
Relaxing.
All right.
So that's kind of like the idea is getting like a left turning rib cage and pelvis.
I like to think of it as more just like, I have the two sides of my body. We're just letting gravity and like air pressure kind of just like push and pull. Like, it's not so much, you can add a rotation. So, I mean, like
like the anterior left being a little more compressed and just trying to get a little more expansion posteriorly, right?
Right. And think of it more as like, because this is kind of that's rectus. This is like a bilateral thing going on. So we want equally, like, I'll cue the same stuff on both sides. So when you flip over, I'll still even have like a right arch underneath my abs, because we're just trying to create like global left side expansion, global right side expansion. And like,
gotcha.
Because we just want that.
Don't look at them together, but can right achieve right stuff and can left achieve left stuff.
Exactly. Because that's what's going to get this to like chill.
Gotcha.
Because essentially it's like, it's wanting to do the job of everything. It's like, like it's kind of how those lats will do as well. Like,
I was a champion at toe to bars when I was in CrossFit.
So
I could do like 50 unbroken.
Right. And like, I think that's a good segue too, to say like, you know, using your six pack isn't a bad muscle by any means. Like, it looks good. It's like, we all want it. It's just when you're doing that activity, like CrossFit, like, yeah, you should use it. But when you leave the gym, like, we need to have a strategy to kind of like leave that at the gym. You know, you don't have to walk around like that all the time.
Tense.
Right. That's the whole goal with this stuff, is to give you more options than you had before.
Yeah. I think it's also talking about the six pack and lats, even to some extent, just the idea of like, we talked about asymmetries as well and how you might have like a little right shift, but that is something that I would not be worried with you right away, because this is like, as human beings, I have a webinar on my YouTube channel for people that want to learn more about this whole asymmetry thing, but really this is who we are as people. This is buried within us as human beings. This is deep, smaller muscles controlling this pattern. Now, your compensations, your anterior pelvic tilt, is bigger muscles closer to the surface. These are the muscles that most people know, like your quads, your hip flexors, your glutes could be pushing you forward. Your six pack could be pulling you forward. Your lats could be pulling you forward or pushing you forward, depending on how you want to look at it. But those muscles are close to the surface and they're trying to basically correct you and trying to upright you against gravity so you can manage gravity. So shutting off those first on both sides is going to be very important, because without doing that, how are we going to get to this deeper stuff underneath? How are we going to get you out of that right lean, so to speak? We're only going to do that if all of that other stuff can shut down. So if people do have asymmetrical things going on, it's important to consider, let's just shut off the big boys first. Let's get them out of the way. Then we're going to have much more success going and being more intricate from there.
You catch yourself doing these exercises and you go, ah, like that's how you know big boy kicking on.
Yeah, no, the breathing's always like, I work on trying to get those long, subtle exhales, but you're right, like I just can't not catch tension. And then I think every once in a while, it's kind of me just like, like trying to reset, almost wiggle room, I guess.
Yeah. It's that huge external compressive strategy, right? This is going to dive in a little bit. Are you narrow?
Yeah, I would say I'm.
Yeah, there's just a big like compressive strategy. Like I do the same thing. I find myself just sigh, like, why am I doing that?
Eli, let's retest you really quick. Let's have you try your hip flexion, laying on the ground, pulling your knee to your chest. Let's try that. See if you can't maybe get that knee down on the floor a little bit better now, or that hamstring. Yeah, that's an improvement for sure.
I'm not cramping, so that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Let's see your other leg, and you can definitely keep that other leg down more, that down leg hamstring.
Yeah, I didn't feel near as much resistance. Also, my hammy didn't wind up trying to keep itself there.
Nice job. Hey, that looks like it's about 120. That's all we want right there. That's great. Let's do straight leg raise now. So I wouldn't actually be surprised if this got worse.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. Yes. Okay. Other side. And you're keeping that other leg down more.
Yeah. Way more.
For sure. Yeah. So your left one got worse because I think we taught your hamstring a little bit.
I could go higher if I like turn in, but not much. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
So that's good. That's actually exactly what I wanted to see there. So you kept your other leg down and you brought the other leg back less, but it was more controlled. And that's a sign that we got your pelvis in a better position. You're not just flinging that guy up there. So that's good.
Yeah.
So we just did a couple of things right there, one set of each, and you're in a better spot, which I think is an indication that if you kept doing these things consistently, you'd see good progress.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And that's something too, like, you know, I've seen a couple people, they'll stand up and they'll have changes in their posture, specifically with pain. Mm-hmm. You know, like if they've had pain that's like pushing them, they're like, oh, I'm trying to get away from it, like low back pain or something. You'll get rid of that and they kind of right themselves. But this type of stuff, like you do it a little bit, you'll see consistent changes in that range of motion. Then you know, like your brain is going to start looking at this and be like, oh, hey, we're in a better position. We're in a different position. And then you start walking around with it. And that's where we'll kind of start seeing this change in an upright posture.
Using the different options now available.
Right. Your body wants to kind of, it's like A and B. You're always hanging out over at A. You don't even know what B is.
Yeah.
I'm just here all the time. That's an anterior pelvic tilt. You give it this option, it's like, well, I want both of these.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go A and B. Guess what? If I sit in the middle, I can get to both places.
That's a great analogy. I love that.
Yeah, funny enough, I'm sure this is relative, but we got like a 50 some odd inch loading dock at the bike shop. And I can jump single leg and land on it on the right. I'm just absolutely like, I attempted with my left and I got maybe like halfway up. It wasn't near as quick of like I just couldn't get the knee up very high and I didn't feel like I had a lot of power leaving the ground. But right leg, I can do a single leg jump up about 48, 50 inches, whatever it's at.
And that's those asymmetries, I think, just coming into play. And I think most people do have that to some extent. And it's not a bad thing. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. And it's something to be managed. And only when asymmetries get out of control to an extent that we cannot control, then that is when I think issues occur and build up. But it's so individual. So I think with you, considering you're not in a lot of pain, I wouldn't even say you have a bunch of red flags. I think you move well and you've been a trainer. So I think you also know how to sort of get your body to do what it wants. Now, if you were someone who was totally untrained and you didn't have a lot of coordination, it might be a different story. But I think that's why it's so context dependent, depending on the individual you're working with and the circumstances they're in.
Mm-hmm. And then something I'm kind of learning more with like the biking field too is some of these asymmetries don't actually become a problem until you've hit a certain duration or certain load capacity for the week or whatever that may be. So it's also like a line of time on when these asymmetries may be problematic under what intensities. And that's something I'm picking up more of, like right toe goes numb, and when I start focus on something, I can get it to dissipate, or like right pointer finger goes numb. And if I kind of change how I'm holding or resting, like I find my right wrist is usually a little more extended when I'm holding the hood, and the left one's just a little more like relatively flexed. And I always find myself having to reach around, but then it just feels like I'm off center. Yeah. Weird.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I think you having body awareness also helps with those things. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people who don't, like I said, train or, been a coach in the past, they don't even know these things exist. And to them, it's like kind of what Kyle said, like you're so far in one direction, you have no idea what it feels like to be in the opposite. So for some people, they'll do these exercises and they'll be like, wow, I feel like I'm way too far back now. It's just like, no, that's just your perception. But in reality, you look a lot better. You're just not used to it. So, and that just goes into the body trying to protect itself.
Definitely.
Weird, new stuff, unfamiliar.
Well, Eli, dude, thank you so much. Boys, you guys can keep talking. I got to run.
Sounds good. Well,
Kyle, appreciate your time, man. It was nice.
Yeah, thank you, Eli. Hey, I'm excited to see this posting and everything. But like I said, you all keep talking.